Imagine you're running a tech startup today. You've just poured, years of your life, your sweat, every dime of venture capital you could find into creating this revolutionary new product.
Yeah, and naturally, you want to protect it, right?
Right. So you go to the government, you file your patents, you get the official stamps, you build this massive legal fortress entirely around your invention.
Which is exactly what you're supposed to do.
Exactly. And then you wake up one morning to find out that a massive multi-billion-dollar corporation has legally set up shop right inside your fortress. They built a wall around your front door and lock you out of your own house.
It sounds like a total dystopian corporate nightmare. But it's entirely real, and it gets to the absolute core of how we completely misunderstand the rules of innovation.
Yeah, because we are constantly fed this very simple, comforting equation about how the world works. Stronger laws equal stronger protections. Stronger protections mean more money for inventors.
And, more money for inventors is supposed to mean a massive explosion in human progress.
Right. It's treated like straightforward physics. You pour a giant bucket of gasoline on a pile of wood, you drop a match, and you get a huge fire.
It is the bedrock assumption of modern economics. We like to believe that human creativity can be perfectly incentivized by legal monopolies. If you just tweak the paperwork and offer a bigger prize, the scientists will inevitably invent faster.
But what happens when you step out of the theoretical textbook? What happens when you run a massive real-world experiment on an entire country? You pour that giant bucket of gasoline, drop the match, and the fire
It stops.
it just stops.
Yeah, you get one of the most fascinating and terrifying structural paradoxes in modern history. The theoretical models promise us a golden age of technology, but the actual hard data slaps that theory right in the face.
And that face slap is exactly what we're delivering today. We are going on an intellectual demolition mission in this deep dive.
We are looking at the patent illusion.
The patent illusion, exactly. We are digging deep into this landmark piece of research by Mariko Sakakibara and Branstetter. And they didn't just run some, computer simulation.
No, they looked at a massive natural experiment, the 1988 Japanese patent law reforms.
It's incredible because it captures this moment where the so-called perfect theory of intellectual property was applied across an entire, highly advanced national economy. Overnight, the rules changed.
And the researchers meticulously tracked where the money went, what the scientists actually did, and who really benefited.
And the truth they uncovered is just wild. It completely destroys conventional wisdom. We're going to break down how giving inventors exponentially more power and more money actually flatlined the growth of real innovation.
But to really get why this completely backfired, we can't just look at the laws in a vacuum, right? We have to look at the pressure cooker of the 1980s.
Right, because rule changes like this, they don't just happen because some politician wakes up feeling generous.
Oh, absolutely not. A legal shift of this magnitude rarely originates from the people actually using the system. It almost always stems from invisible, high-stakes trade wars.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It is. To understand the 1988 reform in Japan, you have to cross the Pacific. You have to look at the sheer anxiety in Washington, D.C. at the time.
Let's paint that picture. So it's the 1980s. Neon lights, the Walkman is taking over the world, and American tech dominance is suddenly feeling very, very fragile.
Precisely. The United States was watching the rapid ascent of Japanese manufacturing and electronics with a growing sense of panic.
Right, they were getting crushed in consumer electronics.
So in response, throughout the 1980s, the U.S. aggressively revamped its own intellectual property laws. They created specialized courts just for patents. They drastically strengthened the legal rights of American patent holders.
And once they fortified their own castle, they looked abroad.
Exactly. They realized they were playing a global game, but everyone else was using completely different rule books.
So the U.S. government starts using its massive economic leverage to force its trading partners to basically harmonize their systems.
They essentially said, our system is the standard, and your system is actively hurting American businesses.
And this is crucial for you to understand listening to this. The Japanese tech giants, companies like Sony, Toshiba, NEC, they were not asking for this reform.
Not at all. There was no domestic uprising of Japanese engineers marching on Tokyo demanding broader patents. They had grown incredibly successful under their own existing system. They were perfectly happy with the status quo.
The push came entirely from American outrage. And to really grasp the sheer mechanics of that outrage, our sources highlight this incredible case study from Harvard Business School. The story of a company called Fusion Systems.
It's the ultimate collision of two completely different legal universes.
Okay, so picture this scrappy American high-tech startup in 1974, Fusion Systems. They invent a genuinely revolutionary microwave lamp. It's cutting-edge technology, highly desirable.
And because they are smart business people, they know Japan is a massive market.
Right, so they head over to the Japanese patent office, and they filed 20 different patents to protect the various components of their microwave lamp.
Now, context is key here. If you hold 20 distinct patents on a single device in the United States in the 70s or 80s, you essentially own the landscape.
You have built an impenetrable legal fortress.
Yeah, no competitor is getting anywhere near your core technology.
But Japan was not the United States. In Japan, those 20 patents weren't a fortress. They were like a chain-link fence with massive holes in it.
And waiting right across the street, just watching those holes, was a titan of Japanese industry, Mitsubishi Electric.
And Mitsubishi doesn't just copy the lamp. They do something much more terrifying. They look at Fusion's 20 patents, they find the tiny microscopic gaps in the legal definitions, and they file 139 of their own patents right in those gaps.
It's insane.
139 patents on slight variations of a technology they didn't even invent.
It is a deliberate, highly aggressive corporate tactic. It's known as patent flooding, or sometimes patent clustering.
But explain how that actually stops the original inventor. I mean, if I invented the core thing, why do I care if Mitsubishi patents a bunch of slight variations around it?
Because technology is never static. Fusion Systems wants to improve their lamp, right? They want to make a version 2.0.
Sure.
But the moment their engineers try to change the design slightly, maybe tweak the casing or adjust the voltage, they instantly step on one of Mitsubishi's 139 surrounding patents.
Wow. So Mitsubishi legally built a minefield entirely around Fusion's house.
Exactly. So Fusion is paralyzed. They can't innovate on their own invention without getting sued by Mitsubishi.
And Mitsubishi's ultimate goal wasn't even to build the lamps themselves, was it?
No, they wanted to force a stalemate. They walk over to Fusion Systems and say, look, you can't move without stepping on our patents. How about we cross-license?
Extortion,
Basically, you give us the rights to your core invention, and we will give you the rights to our 139 variations.
That is just legal extortion. Give us your brilliant idea, or we will literally smother you in paperwork.
And it felt entirely like extortion to the Americans. Fusion Systems panics. They run straight to the United States Trade Representative in Washington. They raise absolute hell.
And this specific incident becomes the poster child for the American argument that the Japanese system is fundamentally unfair to foreign innovators.
Exactly.
Okay, but this raises a massive question. How is it even physically possible to file 139 patents on someone else's lamp? How could Fusion's original 20 patents be so completely weak?
This is where we get to the core mechanical difference between the two economies. Prior to 1988, Japan operated under what was called the single-claim system.
The sashimi system.
Yes, that was the derogatory nickname used by Western critics. Sashimi. Raw fish sliced incredibly thin.
Right.
Under the old Japanese law, a single patent could only cover one singular, hyper-specific technological advance. The intellectual protection you were granted was sliced to the absolute minimum possible thickness.
Break that down for me. Give me a concrete example. Just how thin is this sashimi?
Let's use chemistry, as it's the easiest way to visualize it. Imagine you are a scientist, and you invent an incredible new heat-resistant plastic.
Okay.
In your lab testing, you discovered that this plastic works perfectly as long as it contains anywhere between 10% and 50% of a specific active chemical ingredient.
Okay, so the magic zone is 10 to 50%. Got it.
Right. Now, if you take that data to the U.S. Patent Office, you write a single patent application. You claim the entire range from 10 to 50%.
And they just give it to you.
The U.S. government says, great, you own that entire spectrum. It's broad. It covers the whole concept.
I get the whole fish.
You get the whole fish.
Yeah.
But in pre-1988 Japan, the Patent Office demanded absolute narrow specificity. If you tested 12% in your lab and wrote that down, your Japanese patent only covered 12%.
Wait, seriously, just the 12?
Just the 12. It did not cover 13%. It did not cover 11%.
So what stops a rival company from just looking at my patent, going back to their lab, mixing it at 13% and patenting that?
Absolutely nothing. In fact, that was exactly what the system encouraged them to do. The scope of every single claim was microscopic.
That sounds like an administrative nightmare. If I'm a Japanese chemical company, to protect my 10 to 50% range, I can't just write one sensible document. I have to physically file dozens, maybe hundreds of individual separate patents for 12%, 13%, 14%.
Which is exactly what they did. The old system forced Japanese corporations to generate absolute mountains of weak, redundant paperwork just to build a commercial moat around a single product.
Wow.
It was a massive drain on resources, but it was also designed that way intentionally.
Intentionally. Why would any government want to drown its brightest minds in paperwork?
Because Japan was historically in a catch-up phase of technological development. By keeping the patent scope incredibly narrow, they ensured that foundational breakthroughs made by foreign companies like fusion systems couldn't completely lock up an entire industry.
Oh, I see.
It deliberately left room for domestic Japanese companies to tinker, make slight incremental improvements, and file their own patents. It fostered rapid diffusion of technology.
So it wasn't a bug. It was a feature. It allowed Mitsubishi to swarm fusion systems. But the U.S. finally had enough of this. They dropped the hammer, they threatened massive trade sanctions, and Japan capitulates.
Which brings us to the Big Bang of 1988. Japan entirely rewrites the rules of the game to appease the international community.
And this is where the theoretical gasoline is wheeled out in massive barrels.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the mechanics of this Big Bang, because they didn't just tweak the system. They handed inventors a literal gold mine.
The centerpiece of the 1988 reform was the introduction of the multi-claim system.
So no more sashimi.
Exactly. No more slicing the fish. Starting in January 1988, an inventor in Japan could finally pack multiple interlocking claims into a single patent application. You could have independent claims that define the broad, overarching invention. And directly underneath them, you could attach dependent claims that detailed every specific way to manufacture or implement the idea.
I want to make sure you listening to this really grasp this, because this legal mechanism is the core of everything that follows. How does an independent claim actually work together?
Think of the independent claim as the outer wall of a medieval castle. It defines the broad, absolute perimeter of your property.
I own this hill.
Right. Now, the dependent claims are the specific structures inside the wall. The armory, the keep, the barracks.
Under the old Japanese system, you had to build a separate tiny wall around every single building.
Exactly. And if one wall fell in a lawsuit, you lost that building. But under the new multi-claim system, you build one massive, impenetrable outer wall.
Right.
And even if a competitor somehow invalidates a tiny part of your dependent claim, say they prove your specific armory design isn't new, the massive outer wall of the independent claim still stands, and they still can't enter your property.
That is infinitely more powerful. You are expanding the scope of a single piece of paper by magnitudes.
Yeah.
You can finally patent the entire 10 to 50% chemical range in one shot, and simultaneously patent the intermediate chemicals created while mixing it.
Overnight, the scope of a Japanese patent equaled and in some ways exceeded the immense power of the American and European systems.
But they didn't stop there. The tech companies got a massive upgrade, but the pharmaceutical industry got something even better. They hit an absolute jackpot.
They received a highly lucrative specific carve-out. The 1988 law granted patent term restoration for pharmaceuticals.
Explain term restoration. What does that actually mean?
When you invent a new drug, you file a patent immediately. But you can't sell it yet. You have to put it through years of rigorous clinical trials and safety testing to get government approval.
Obviously.
So if your patent lasts for 20 years, but testing takes 7 years, you've actually lost 7 years of your legal monopoly just waiting in line.
The clock is ticking while the drug is stuck in the lab.
Exactly. The 1988 reform said, that's unfair to the drug companies. So Japan allowed pharmaceutical firms to extend their patents for up to 5 additional years to compensate for the regulatory delay.
5 extra years of pure, legally enforced monopoly, no generic competitors. In the drug business, a blockbuster drug makes billions of dollars a year. 5 extra years is an unfathomable amount of money.
It is the holy grail. They were handed broader patents that covered more ground and longer patents that lasted further into the future.
And we haven't even talked about the immediate upfront cash they saved. Because filing all those tiny sashimi patents wasn't just annoying, it was incredibly expensive. The researchers actually cracked the ledgers to see how much this new system saved corporate Japan.
The math here is staggering. Let's look at the administrative friction. Every time you file a patent, you pay a fixed filing fee to the government, you pay an annual maintenance fee,
Right.
but most importantly, you pay a massive fee to an external patent attorney to draft the complex legal language.
So let's look at the baseline. The researchers used the 1996 fee standards to calculate this. Walk me through the cost of an average invention.
Okay, under the new, powerful multi-claim system, let's say an average patent contains roughly 3.77 claims.
Very precise, okay.
The total lifetime cost to hire the lawyer, file the paperwork, and maintain that single multi-claim patent over its lifespan was roughly 2.5 million yen.
Okay, 2.5 million yen for the whole castle. Now let's fire up the time machine and go back to the old sashimi days. To get that exact same level of protection for your invention, you couldn't write one document. You had to file those 3.77 claims as entirely separate standalone patents.
Which means you are paying the lawyer's drafting fee almost 4 times. You are paying the government's fixed application fee almost 4 times.
Ouch.
To achieve the exact same legal coverage under the old rules, it would cost a company over 8 million yen.
2.5 million versus 8 million. That is a 68.9% discount on the cost of protecting your ideas.
On every single invention.
Right. So when you multiply that massive discount across every corporation, every chemical plant, every tech lab in the entire Japanese economy, what is the total windfall?
The researchers conservatively estimate that the reform saved Japanese companies roughly 17 billion US dollars.
17 billion dollars?
Capital that was previously incinerated by administrative friction and bureaucratic filing fees was suddenly freed up overnight.
Okay, stop right here. Let's put on our economist hats for a second. You just handed corporate Japan $17 billion in savings. You gave them a legal mechanism that makes their patents immensely broader and stronger. And for the pharma guys, you threw in an extra 5 years of pure monopoly.
Yeah.
If the textbooks are right, what is supposed to happen next?
According to the foundational theories of economics, we should witness an absolute explosion of human ingenuity. We have to talk about William Nordhaus here.
Oh, right.
In the late 1960s, Nordhaus mapped out the optimal design of patent systems. He codified the fundamental trade-off that society makes with inventors.
Give me the ELI 5 on the Nordhaus trade-off. Why do we even tolerate monopolies? Because generally, monopolies are bad for us, right? They raise prices.
They are terrible for consumers in the short term. Nordhaus called this the static loss. When you give a pharmaceutical company a 20-year patent on a cancer drug, they're the only ones allowed to make it. They can charge whatever they want. That hurts society today.
So why do we let them do it?
Because of the dynamic social gain. Society willingly suffers the high prices today because that massive guaranteed profit is the ultimate carrot.
Ah, the incentive.
It is the incentive that convinces the company to spend billions of dollars and a decade of research to invent the cancer drug in the first place. The temporary monopoly induces greater innovative effort.
We suffer today, so the future gets better technology.
Precisely. And the entire body of economic literature that followed Nordhaus assumes a very direct, highly rational relationship. If you lower the cost of patenting, broaden the scope of what can be patented, or lengthen the time the patent lasts, you massively increase the marginal return on research and development.
You make the prize at the end of the maze bigger, shinier, and vastly cheaper to carry home.
And if the prize is bigger, a rational corporation will immediately redirect more capital into their laboratories. They will hire more scientists, they will run more experiments, because every new discovery is now mathematically worth much, much more.
It is the perfect setup. You pour the gasoline, you drop the match. Corporate Japan, in 1988, is sitting on a $17 billion windfall and a turbocharged legal system. R&D spending should go completely nuclear. The sheer volumes of new breakthrough inventions should skyrocket. That is what the math promises.
But then the researchers actually looked at the data.
And the data delivers an absolute ringing slap to the face of economic theory.
It is one of the most profound anticlimaxes in the history of empirical research.
Let's walk through the timeline. The researchers plot out the Japanese patent application trends spanning the entire post-war period. You trace a line from 1945 upwards. As Japan rebuilds its economy, the line is steadily climbing. Year after year, more patents, more innovation. The slope is going up.
It's a healthy, continuous ascent.
And then we hit 1988, the year of the Big Bang, the year the ultimate incentive is unlocked. This is the moment the line should go vertical. It should shoot straight up to the moon. What actually happens to the line?
The growth slope breaks. It simply flatlines.
It stops. The massive explosion of ideas just didn't happen.
It's actually worse than just failing to explode. The researchers looked closely at specific, major technological sectors. In vital fields like physics, electricity, and chemistry, the absolute number of patent applications actually fell.
Boy, I need to process that. The law hands them the most powerful intellectual property tools in history, and they respond by inventing LESS. They file fewer applications in the core sciences. How is that even possible?
Well, to be precise, the growth rate declined sharply. The absolute number across the entire economy was still creeping up at a glacial pace, but the historical acceleration entirely vanished exactly when the legal incentive was maximized.
Okay, if the total number of applications fell or stalled, what on earth were these massive R&D departments doing with their time? We know they weren't inventing new things.
They were doing exactly what a complex bureaucracy is trained to do. They were optimizing the paperwork. They were repackaging.
Repackaging, the great fake boom.
Exactly. When the researchers looked past the number of applications and analyzed the content of the applications, they found the missing activity. They tracked the number of claims stuffed inside each individual application.
So they didn't file more patents, but the patents they did file got incredibly fat.
Precisely. Right at the 1988 marker, the number of claims per patent spikes vertically. It shoots into the stratosphere, especially in the chemical sectors and human necessities, which includes pharmaceuticals. A few years later, the electrical and physics firms figure out the game, and their claims spike too.
So they didn't magically invent more technology. They just walked over to their filing cabinets, scooped up 15 old, hyper-specific sashimi slices, and hired lawyers to aggressively stuff them all into one giant, legally terrifying multi-claim document.
The innovation was not happening at the laboratory bench. The innovation was happening in the legal department. They rapidly learned how to consolidate their existing intellectual property into the new, more powerful format.
It's like taking 5 small checking accounts and combining them into one big savings account. You haven't actually made any new money, you just changed how it's organized at the bank. But wait, I want to play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Even if they are just repackaging old ideas into fatter patents, maybe that's a good thing? The whole point of a strong patent is to create a safe, stable environment where a company can build a factory and manufacture their product without constantly fighting off copycats.
Right.
Did this new system at least create corporate peace?
That is a very logical assumption. But when we look at what actually happened in the real world, when these massive multi-claim patents finally started getting approved and entering the market, the result was anything but peace.
Let's talk about the lawsuit explosion, because this blew my mind.
This is perhaps the most dangerous and unintended consequence of the entire reform. The researchers pulled the data on newly filed intellectual property lawsuits in Japan.
Now, you have to contextualize this for an American audience. In the U.S., companies sue each other before breakfast. It's a reflex.
Exactly.
But suing someone in Japan, historically, carries a very different weight, right?
Absolutely. The cultural and structural barriers to litigation in Japan are immense. It is extremely expensive. It is time-consuming. And historically, civil litigation is undertaken with extreme reluctance.
It disrupts business harmony.
Yes. A Japanese corporation generally only goes to court if they are pushed to the absolute brink or if they are overwhelmingly confident they have a lethal legal weapon.
So we look at the timeline. The reform passes in 1988. It takes roughly 2 to 3 years for a patent filed in '88 to grind through the bureaucracy and actually get officially granted by the government.
So the new weapons don't actually hit the battlefield until about 1990 or 1991. And what happens to the lawsuit data?
It erupts. The chart go completely parabolic. The number of screaming matches in Japanese courtrooms broke every historical record.
The most direct, measurable, indisputable product of this stronger patent system was not a revolutionary new microchip or a life-saving medical device. It was a massive, unprecedented stack of lawyers' invoices.
How does that happen? Why did everyone suddenly start suing everyone else?
Because suddenly the landscape was flooded with these giant, vague, multi-claim patents. And inevitably, these massive new castles started overlapping with everyone else's massive new castles.
Under the old sashimi system, the patents were so small and specific that there was plenty of empty space between them.
Exactly. Economists call that empty space the commons. It's a safe zone. If you filed a patent that was even slightly too broad, the Japanese Patent Office would reject it to protect the commons. This ensured there was always room for competitors to operate safely nearby.
But the 1988 law handed companies the power to intentionally fill in the commons.
Yes. They used the new multi-claim dependent structures to intentionally bleed their legal boundaries outward into adjacent technological spaces.
Wow.
They were deliberately building minefields in areas they didn't even plan to develop just to block their competitors from going there.
So a system explicitly designed by economists to encourage scientists to build the future actually just handed corporations a giant club to bash each other over the head with. That is wild.
And it gets worse, because lawsuits are just a symptom. The fundamental promise of the entire Norhaus economic theory, the absolute core justification for giving these monopolies in the first place, is that stronger patents will force companies to spend more money on research and development.
Show me the money. Did they actually invest in the labs?
To answer this, the researchers built an incredibly detailed data set. They tracked the real inflation-adjusted R&D spending of 307 publicly traded Japanese manufacturing firms over a 14-year period from 1981 to 1994.
307 major corporations. This isn't some small sample size. This is the heartbeat of the Japanese economy. And what did the ledgers reveal?
They found a very clear historical trend. Starting in the early 1980s, long before the American pressure or the patent reforms, there was a massive organic boom in R&D spending across these firms. Japanese companies were aggressively investing their own capital into innovation to compete globally.
Okay, so the baseline of investment is already climbing rapidly. The train is moving fast.
But look at the exact moment we hit 1988, the year the multi-claim system arrives, the year the $17 billion windfall hits their bank accounts. What happens to the fast-moving train?
It hits a brick wall. The trend line stalls completely.
It doesn't just stall relative to the previous growth. In 1988 and 1989, the R&D spending actually dips below the expected trend line. It goes backward.
Unreal.
It picks up a tiny bit in 1990, but then dies off entirely when the broader Japanese macroeconomic recession hits in 1992.
Now, I know what the economics professors listening to this are screaming right now. You can't just look at a raw line on a graph. What about the macroeconomy? What about inflation? What about industry-specific shocks? Correlation isn't causation.
And the researchers completely agree, which is why they didn't just look at a raw line. They ran massive, rigorous, fixed effects regression models.
Give us the jargon-free translation of what that actually means.
It means they mathematically filtered out the noise. They built an equation that controlled for every possible distraction. They accounted for the size of each specific firm. They accounted for the differences between the auto industry and the chemical industry. They accounted for the overall health of the Japanese economy, interest rates, you name it.
Right.
They stripped away every excuse to isolate the pure, undeniable impact of the 1988 patent law on R&D budgets.
And what is the final mathematically undeniable verdict?
The verdict is absolute zero. There is zero statistical evidence that this massive economy-wide legal reform induced any extra R&D spending whatsoever. None.
Wait, zero. But
Yeah.
what about the pharmaceutical companies? We just spent 10 minutes talking about the pharma jackpot. They were literally handed up to 5 extra years of pure monopoly protection.
Right.
They got the fat multi-claims A&E, the extra time. If anyone was going to pour billions into a new lab, it's a drug company that just got handed a 5-year golden ticket.
Sakakibara and Branstetter anticipated that exact disbelief. So they isolated a specific subsample of 26 major Japanese pharmaceutical companies. This is the group that relies on patents for their sheer survival. This is the group that received the most blatant, targeted structural benefit from the reforms.
So they ran the mathematical filter on just the drug companies. Did they find the missing innovation?
They found nothing. They ran the exact same regressions on those 26 firms. The R&D response to the new laws was statistically zero.
That is mind-boggling.
The group that benefited the most from the legal shift did absolutely nothing new in response to it. They pocketed the administrative cost savings, they weaponized their existing portfolios with multi-claims to file lawsuits, but they did not increase their innovative effort by a single yen.
They were handed the keys to the kingdom, and they just locked the door and went to sleep. This is a total destruction of conventional economic logic. Now, despite this mountain of evidence, I can still hear the skeptics. Someone listening is desperately trying to save the theory. They're saying, okay, maybe the Japanese financial data is just weird. Maybe their accounting practices hide the real innovation. Maybe they were inventing incredible things, but it just doesn't show up on a spreadsheet.
It is a valid scientific critique. If you find a result this contradictory, you have to test it against an independent variable. You need a control group that is completely untainted by the Japanese economy.
And this leads us to the most brilliant part of the study. The researchers deploy the ultimate lie detector test,
The Trans-Pacific Truth Serum.
the United States Patent Office.
Exactly. The U.S. Patent Office serves as the perfect, pristine control group. The United States did not change its fundamental patent laws in 1988. The U.S. system was stable, predictable, and operated under the same rules it always had.
So the logic here is bulletproof. These are massive global corporations. Sony, Toyota, Takeda Pharmaceuticals. If the 1988 reform in Japan truly sparked an invisible renaissance of innovation, if scientists were secretly inventing incredible new microchips and drugs that just weren't showing up in the Tokyo accounting ledgers, where would those brilliant new inventions inevitably show up?
They would absolutely show up in Washington, D.C. If a Japanese company invents a world-changing technology, they aren't going to hide it. They are going to immediately patent it in the United States, the largest consumer market on the planet, to protect their export profits.
Japanese corporations are historically ruthless about patenting in America. They consistently account for roughly a quarter of all U.S. patents granted.
So the researchers shifted their focus. They pulled the data on every single patent filed by Japanese firms in the United States around the 1988 timeline. If the Japanese legal reform truly triggered a golden age of ideas, we should see a massive tidal wave of brilliant, high-quality Japanese patents crashing into the U.S. Patent Office shortly after 1988.
The lie detector is hooked up, the dials are spinning. What do the U.S. filings show?
They show a flat line. The needle doesn't move.
Let's break down exactly what the researchers tested here. First, they looked at sheer quantity.
Right. Did Japanese firms suddenly file a much higher number of patents in the U.S.? The data shows an upward trend starting in the early 80s, which perfectly mirrors that early organic R&D boom we discussed earlier. But right at 1988, there is no acceleration. There is no sudden spike.
Wow.
The 1988 reform produced no structural change in the quantity of Japanese inventions hitting American shores.
Okay, so they didn't file more patents, but maybe the inventions they did file were just, bigger, broader in scope.
The researchers tested that too. They looked at the number of claims packed into the U.S. patents filed by Japanese firms. They looked at the number of technical classes assigned to those patents by the U.S. examiners, which is a great way to measure how broad an idea is.
And did the ideas get broader?
No increase whatsoever attributable to the 1988 reform. The breadth of the ideas remained exactly the same as before.
But here is the ultimate test, the real kicker: quality. Did the ideas get smarter? Were they better inventions? Because you could argue that maybe they filed the same amount of patents, but because of the new Japanese laws, they only focused on the highest tier, world-changing breakthroughs.
That is the final defense of the theory. To test it, economists use a specific metric to measure the quality or importance of an invention. They look at citations.
Okay, stop and give the listener a quick ELI 5 on patent citations, because this isn't like citing a book in a high school essay.
It's actually quite similar in concept, but with massive legal implications. When a scientist or a lawyer files a new patent, they are legally required to list all the previous patents that their new invention builds upon. It's an intellectual bibliography.
The footprints in the snow of innovation.
Exactly. Now, if you invent a mediocre, highly specific variation of toaster, maybe one or two future toaster patents will cite you 10 years from now. But if you invent a truly foundational, brilliant piece of technology, let's say the original touchscreen interface for a smartphone, thousands and thousands of future patents for tablets, phones, and computers will be forced to cite your original patent because your idea is the foundation of the entire building.
So a high citation rate equals high technological quality. It proves your idea actually changed the world.
Yes. The researchers used a sophisticated tracking method to count these citations. They looked at the citedness of Japanese patents filed in the U.S. before the 1988 reform, and they compared it to the citedness of Japanese patents filed after the reform.
The moment of truth. Did the post-1988 Japanese patents get cited more? Did the quality of the innovation improve?
No. In fact, their citation rate slightly declined.
They got worse.
The patents got incredibly bloated and fat at home in Japan, but the actual technological impact of those inventions on the global stage did not improve whatsoever. By the citation metric, the quality slightly degraded.
The lie detector buzzes loudly. The structural disconnect is just absolute. The Japanese firms fundamentally changed how they filled out paperwork in Tokyo to exploit the new legal system. They hired lawyers, they bundled claims, they sued their rivals, but they did not change what they were doing in the lab. The promised explosion of innovation was a total mirage.
Which forces us to step back and ask the ultimate, most important question of this entire deep dive: why did it fail?
Right, because the system wasn't technically broken. The law worked exactly as written, and the economic theory of Nordhaus isn't necessarily evil. It makes logical sense on paper. You give people a bigger reward, they work harder. Why didn't that logic translate to reality?
The failure lies in a massive, fundamental assumption that theoretical economists make. They assume that a modern corporation operates like a single, perfectly rational human brain.
But a corporation is not a brain.
No, a corporation is a sprawling, messy, highly segmented bureaucracy. And this raises an incredibly important point about the reality of how innovation actually happens inside a company. The economic model assumes the innovator is an individual who perfectly understands and internalizes the legal incentives. If the government increases the monopoly reward, the brain instantly says, great, I will work twice as hard today.
But that's not how a company with 10,000 employees works.
Not at all. To figure out what was really happening on the ground, the researchers didn't just look at spreadsheets. They conducted deep, qualitative interviews with the general managers of the intellectual property departments at 10 major Japanese manufacturing corporations.
They actually talked to the people running the system. What did they find?
What they found completely annihilates the assumptions of the textbook economic model. The interviews revealed a profound, almost comical organizational disconnect. First of all, they discovered that over 90% of corporate patent work was completely outsourced to external patent agents.
Wait, what? 90%? So the company isn't even writing its own patents. If I'm Sony inventing a cutting-edge new television screen, I'm just mailing the technical specs to a law firm across town and hoping they understand the physics well enough to write the legal boundary.
Essentially, yes. The companies lacked the internal capacity to handle the sheer volume of paperwork, especially after the rules changed and became vastly more complex in 1988.
But even for the 10% they did internally, what was the dynamic?
Even internally, there was a massive, impenetrable communication wall. You have to visualize the physical structure of these companies. On one side, you have the R&D department. These are the scientists, the engineers. They are in the laboratory, mixing chemicals, soldering wires, running computer simulations. Their entire focus is on the science.
And on the other side.
On the other side, usually in a completely different building or even a different city, you have the patent department. These are the lawyers and administrators. Their entire focus is on writing legal claims and navigating the bureaucracy of the patent office.
So the people doing the inventing and the people doing the patenting live in completely different universes.
And they speak completely different languages. The researchers found that feedback from the legal department back to the R&D department was incredibly limited. The lawyers didn't go to the lab and say, hey, if you tweak this formula, we can get a broader patent under the new law.
Because they don't understand the chemistry. And the scientist in the lab doesn't wake up on January 1st, 1988 and say, wow, the multi-claim system is finally active. I'm going to invent twice as hard today.
The scientist doesn't even know what a dependent multi-claim structure is.
Exactly. The institutional structure of a large modern corporation acts as a massive insulator. Changing a highly complex legal rule in Tokyo doesn't make a scientist's beaker boil any faster in an Osaka laboratory. The legal incentive from the government never actually reaches the laboratory bench.
The only people who intercept and react to the legal incentive are the lawyers. Which explains perfectly, and somewhat tragically, everything we've discussed today. Why did the number of claims per patent instantly spike? Because the legal department learned how to optimize their workflow under the new rules. Why did the lawsuits erupt? Because the legal department was handed bigger weapons.
And why did the R&D spending flatline?
Because the R&D department was entirely insulated from the legal changes. They just kept doing what they always did based on the scientific budgets they were already given.
It's a devastating indictment of how we write laws. We design policies for theoretical individuals, and we apply them to massive bureaucracies, which forces us to rethink everything. If patents aren't acting as a direct engine to motivate scientists and drive human progress, what are they actually doing?
To answer that, we have to look beyond Japan. We have to look at the global consensus emerging in complex industries. Our sources point to the critical work of Bronwyn Hall and Rosemarie Zidonis. They extensively studied the United States semiconductor industry.
Microchips, the foundation of the modern world.
And their findings in the U.S. align perfectly with the reality of this Japanese experiment. In highly complex cumulative industries like electronics or software, A single commercial product like a smartphone or a laptop might rely on thousands or even tens of thousands of overlapping patents.
It's a dense jungle of legal rights.
In this environment, a patent completely loses its romanticized function. It is no longer a tool to protect a lone, brilliant inventor in a garage from having their idea stolen by an evil corporation.
If it's not a protective tool for the inventor, what is it?
It's a weapon. Or, more accurately, it's a shield in a never-ending corporate war. Hall and Zedonis found that strengthening patents in these industries mostly just forces companies to create what are called defensive patent portfolios.
A defensive portfolio. Explain how that works in practice.
It is the exact equivalent of the Cold War concept of mutually assured destruction, MAD. Let's say you and I run competing tech companies. I know that if I try to build a new smartphone, I am inevitably going to accidentally step on one of your thousands of patents, and when I do, you are going to sue me and shut down my factory.
Right. I have the legal right to crush you.
But if I spend millions of dollars building a massive bloated shield of my own patents, even if they are weak, repackaged sashimi patents, then when you sue me, I can instantly countersue you for stepping on one of mine.
Ah, so we end up in a legal stalemate.
Exactly. We meet in a boardroom with our lawyers. We realize that if we go to court, we will destroy each other. So we agree to just cross-license our portfolios to each other. We shake hands, and we both go back to building our smartphones.
That is a socially wasteful arms race.
Yeah.
You don't build a nuclear weapon because you want to drop it on someone. You build it entirely so no one drops one on you.
And that is what a massive portion of the global patent system has become. A company spends millions of dollars paying lawyers to file thousands of complex patents, not because they actually plan to manufacture all those specific ideas, but simply so they aren't walking onto the corporate battlefield unarmed.
And when you look at the 1988 Japanese reform through that lens, it all makes perfect, cynical sense. The Japanese government didn't fund the future of technology. They just handed everyone a cheaper, more efficient way to build a bigger pile of legal nuclear weapons. It didn't fund the future of human progress. It explicitly funded the future of courtroom warfare.
And that is the profound, unsettling takeaway from the Sakakibara and Branstetter study. The 1988 Japanese experiment proves conclusively that blindly strengthening patent laws, increasing monopoly power, and lowering filing costs does not magically grow innovation.
It just changes how massive corporations package their paperwork. It encourages them to hire more lawyers, file broader claims, and sue their rivals into submission.
It highlights how dangerously flawed our basic economic assumptions can be when they completely ignore the messy, bureaucratic reality of how human beings and corporate hierarchies actually operate.
Which brings us directly back to you, the listener. If you've made it this far into a deep dive on 1980s Japanese patent law, you might be asking, why does this specific historical footnote matter to my life today? It matters because the exact same narrative, the exact same theoretical promises, and the exact same political pressures are being spun up right now all around us.
History has a dangerous tendency to repeat itself, especially when there are billions of dollars on the line.
The next time you open a news app and see headlines about a government strengthening its IP laws to boost the tech economy or protect domestic innovators, you now know the truth. You have the ultimate lie detector. You know to look right past the political promises and the textbook economics. You know to look for the bureaucratic reality.
And you must apply that lens to where we are right now in history. Because right now, we are sitting in the middle of a massive, unprecedented global boom in artificial intelligence.
The AI gold rush. OpenAI, Google, Anthropic.
The tech giants of today are spending millions of dollars lobbying Washington, Brussels, and Tokyo. They are actively demanding stronger, longer, and vastly broader intellectual property protections. They want patents over core AI algorithms. They want copyright protections over massive training data sets. They want to legally own the automated outputs of these models.
And what is the argument they use in front of Congress to justify these massive new monopolies? It is the exact same argument used in 1988. They sit at the microphone and say, give us stronger monopolies, give us a longer runway, and we will protect the future of innovation. We will use those guaranteed profits to build better, safer, more advanced AI for humanity.
It sounds incredibly convincing. It is the Nordhaus promise all over again. But based on the terrifying data we just unpacked from Japan, based on the absolute failure of the multi-claim system to induce a single yen of new R&D spending, this raises a crucial, urgent question for our society today. Are we simply repeating the fatal mistake of the 1980s?
By giving these massive, sprawling tech giants stronger legal monopolies over the foundational algorithms of AI, Are we actually funding the future of human progress? Are we incentivizing the scientists in the lab? Or are we just pouring a massive bucket of theoretical gasoline onto a fire that is already dying out? Are we just funding the future of courtroom warfare, where tech giants use multi-claim AI patents to block startups from ever entering the market?
The data strongly suggests that we should take that risk very seriously.
It is the ultimate diagnostic test for the modern economy. And it's something for you to think about the next time someone tries to tell you that the physics of economics are simple and that stronger rules always lead to a better world. Until next time, keep questioning the consensus.